this tutorial, we're gonna try to randomize the questions along with the choices in a multiple choice question test using Excel. Now, to simplify this tutorial, let's try to deal with 5 problems only. Now, this is important for educators and learners alike if you want to be able to make flashcards or multiple choice exams with multiple sets. And so what you're gonna do first is you need to open up Excel, and then on your first sheet, you need to input the choices along with the correct answer. And so here we have the following questions. There are actually some terms and a bit of problem solving, and so there's also a way to randomize values for problem solving questions, and then I'll also be teaching that. Now, ideally, the correct answer must be located in your first column, and then here for choice 2, choice 3, and choice 4, you can input here some tricky values or answers that are near the correct answer. And so within these columns, these are the wrong options. Now for the last column, you need to reference the correct answers so that this will help create our answer key. So let's type in answer key, and then we'll reference the cell. Drag this down, and so we already have our answers. And so now, the first thing that we're going to do is we'll randomize the questions. Now how are we going to do that? To randomize the questions, we need 2 functions. We need the rand function, which creates random numbers, and we also need the rank function. Now this rank function will rank the random numbers in descending order. And then once that's done, then we can use another function, which is index, so that from this list, we can identify what item it is. And so let's just name this randomized questions, and then here input rand, and then open and close parenthesis, press enter. And so now, since we have 5 rows, by the way, to make this more flexible, let's just randomize the questions in another sheet, so that if you'll add another question, let's say 6, 7, 8, it won't affect our code. Now let's name this our question bank, and then we'll add another sheet, and then let's name this randomize questions. And so here, in my first column, let's type in rand, and then open and close parenthesis. Let's drag it down. You may drag this down up to any location, depending on the number of questions. However, since I only have 5, then I will just use 5 rows. So let me just delete this. Let's use 5 rows. And then, for the second column, we're gonna be ranking these numbers. And so to do that, input rank. And then here, we're gonna reference this cell first, so that it will rank this value among these values. And so as you can see here, we have number, that's the number that we will compare, and then press comma. Here you have the reference. And so for the reference, you need to highlight these cells because it contains the cells that you want to rank. And so this is now our reference. And so let's close this. By default, it will rank by order. And so we now have this. Now number 3 is in the middle of the order. And so to not make it vague, just press F9, and then once you press F9, it's gonna change the random numbers. So press F9 to calculate. It will change the numbers, and then let's just actually consider 4 because this isn't in the middle of the order. Now what 4 means is this is the 4th lowest number among the other numbers. And so if we are going to manually rank this, this is number 1, 0.88, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, and this is number 5. And so this is the function of rank. And so let's drag this down. As you can see, it won't order our number the right way. Now this is because our reference here is not a fixed reference. Or in terms of Excel, it's not an absolute reference. Now to make this an absolute reference, you need to add $signs before the letter and after the letter. Now since we are ranking this column, then we need to make this an absolute reference. And so you can manually type in $signs, or you can just highlight the column that you will be referencing and then press F4. And so it automatically adds $signs before the letters and numbers. So press enter, and then let's drag this down. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so this is the highest number, this is the second highest, and so on. And so we now have different numbers which will define the order of our questions. And so what we're gonna do next is we'll use the index function, and then we'll reference the following questions. And so here, press equals, and then input index. And then first, we need to highlight the column that we are gonna reference. And so since this is the list of our questions, we can highlight this one, and then let's just make this an absolute reference. Press F4, and then once that's done, press comma, and then we're gonna be taking the row number from our defined column. Now since this is our defined column, and then these are our randomized numbers, press comma, and then the row number will be this value. Let me just repeat that. Index, and then highlight the column, and then our row number will be this value. So what this does is, it will take the second question from the list of questions, and then it will make it as the first question. And then let's just make this an absolute reference. Highlight the column, and then press F4, and then press enter. You now have this. Now for you to better understand this is number 4. So it's gonna take the fourth question from our question bank. So here, the fourth question is, a metal bar is 5 meters long. So this is now our first question in this sheet. And so if you will drag this down, our question will now be randomized. And then if you will press F9, it will automatically change the existing questions. And so if you can see here, this is number 2. So this is also number 2 right here. And then this is number 5, so it's gonna take the fifth question, which is this one. And so we are done with the questions. Now, so that we can input the choices, just highlight this, and then go to formatting, format cells, go to alignment, and then we're gonna pick shrink to fit. Now this is so that we can add another column for the choices, which will also be randomized. Now to make this more intuitive, let me just add another row, or let's just actually use wrap text. So format cells, and then let's wrap the text. Let's just move this a bit. These are now our questions. Now once you have finished and checked the code, it's actually better to use shrink to fit in order to be able to see the columns directly. And so now, randomizing the choices will be a bit tricky, as it will require some analysis. And so this is what we are going to do. First, let's make 4 columns for the randomized choices. So let's say this is, let's merge these cells. These are our randomized choices. And then in the same way earlier, we're gonna use the rand function and the rank function. And then we'll also be using the index function. So let's just copy this. And so in our randomized choices, this will be, let's say A, this is B, C, and this is D. And so first, you're gonna want to establish random numbers. And so let's merge this. Let's input random numbers. Now in here, we'll input rand, and then open and close parenthesis. Let's drag this here, and then let's drag this down. And so we now have random numbers assigned to our choices. And so to make these whole numbers, we're gonna rank them. So this is for the rank, and then we're gonna be ranking each row. So rank, and then this is our first number, comma, and then this is our reference. And then let's just use absolute referencing. So press F4, and then enter. These numbers are already ranked in descending order. Now notice here that if I will drag this down, it will mess up our code. Now this is because we are using an absolute reference right here. This one will change, but since the reference will not, then it will establish ambiguity. As you can see here, this part did not change. And so what we're gonna do is, we're actually gonna use mixed referencing. Now notice that the numbers we are checking are all along the same column. For this one, we have columns along L. And then for this one, we have column M. And then for this one, we have column N. And then here we have column O. And so since the column is not changing, we're only gonna put the $sign before the column, or simply before the letter. Now we're gonna remove the $sign before the numbers, because that's only the value that we want to change. Now another way to do this is to press F4 again, but this is going to make the row number constant. And so press F4 again. It will now fix the column, but it will change the row number. As you can see, before the number, we already don't have a $sign, but you can still input it manually if you wish to. And so press enter, and then let's drag this, and then we'll drag it down. It's now going to work. And so these are now our assigned values for our choices. Let's just remove this because our question is starting here. And so now, we're gonna be using the index function to identify the choices. And so type in index, and then we're gonna choose from this row the correct answer, choice 2, choice 3, and choice 4 for A, B, C, and D. And then so that we can randomize the choices, let's make this our column number. And so here, the column is still fixed, but we want the numbers to change. If we'll drag it down, we need to add $signs right here before the columns. And so let's drag this. Now as you can see here, we have 1 for Poisson's ratio, which is aligned to this column, and then we have number 3 for the deformation ratio, and then letter C is gonna be, let's just make this A, B, C, and D so that it will be clear. So again, we have 1 for Poisson's ratio, number 4 for strain ratio, and so that's gonna correspond with our choices. And so if we'll drag this down, it's also gonna randomize the choices for the other questions. Now what if you want to modify the values of problem solving items? what are you gonna do? Now to modify some values, let's say for this question, let's just consider one variable. Let's say you want to change 100, and then let's establish a range. Since this is the temperature rise, then this value must be greater than 25. And so to be able to change this, we will turn this statement into a formula. So press equals, and then let's add a quotation mark, and then also here, let's add a space so that once we add the number, it will not be directly after the word to. And then let's also add a quotation mark right here. Now in between the quotation marks, since this is the number that we want to change, type in ampersand, and then after which, we can now use the randBetween function. Now what this does is, it picks a number between your range. And so let's say, this is the bottom range, so let's pick a number greater than 25, let's say 100, and then the top value of our range is, let's say 130, and then to complete this, add another ampersand, and so this value will now be random. As you can see, it is now 129, and then if you will press F9, it will change this value. However, since you need some plugins to identify this number, to take that number from this string function, then what's ideal to do is to add another column for the values that you want to change. And so instead of this one, let's just try to reference a cell. Let's remove this. Let's just make this 100 again. And so I will teach you how to incorporate a random value for this particular variable. And so what's going to be ideal to do is to insert another column right here. This is for our random constants. Now for number 4, we want to use randBetween, and then our range is from 100 to 130. And so we're gonna reference this value, and then let's place it here. And so to do that, just remove this number, and then we'll reference this cell. So press enter. This will now be 103, and then if you will press F9, that's going to change our number. Now for this item, this is a question in engineering mechanics, and so for the purpose of discussion, I have included here the formula. Now let's say for the first choice, let's type in the correct answer. And so using this formula, we have E, which is 200,000, this one, multiplied by the coefficient of thermal expansion, which is 11.6 times 10 to minus 6, and then multiplied by delta T. Now since we made our final temperature variable, then we need to reference this cell. So this is the final temperature minus the initial temperature, which is constant, which is 25. So type in 25, and then we can now press enter. And so this is going to be our correct answer. And then since for this question we have two types of stresses, it may be compressive or tensile, then we can add an ampersand. And then since the correct answer for this question is compressive stress, let's include this here. This is the quotation mark should be right here. So press enter. We now have this value. And so let's drag this. For this question to be tricky, let's retain the value. So this one, this is 227, but let's make this tensile. And then here, you can play with your given. You can remove the referenced cell for this one. And then here, you can make this tensile, and then you can use this cell. So press enter. These are now our choices, or we can just make this also the reference cell. And so these are now our choices. This is for problem solving questions. However, since we have a checklist of our correct answer and then the other choices, then in here, this will now randomize these choices. And so we now have this. Now, in formatting, since we want to number this and then we also want to add the choices, then let's just use another sheet. And so let's name this our test format. And so here, we're gonna reference the choices. Let's start with this one. What we'll include here would be the randomized choices. So press enter. Let's drag this. This is now the fully randomized test questions with their corresponding choices. However, if you want to automate this and then just directly copy to Microsoft Word, we need to input everything in our test format. Now for the test format, we want to add a corresponding letter to this one. And so how are we going to do that? How can we make this A, this one B, this one C, and this one D? To do that, we'll just add quotation mark and then A, period, and then space so that the number or words will not be directly after the letter, and then press quotation mark and then use the ampersand. So press enter. It's now going to add A before our choice. And so let's drag this. Let's make this B, this one C, and let's make this D. So highlight, and then let's drag this down. These are now our choices. So this one, comma, letter C, and comma, letter D. So press enter. Notice that it will not add a space or a line break for each of the choices. Just for you to see, let's open up Word. Let's copy this and then keep text only, or you may also just keep the source formatting. Notice that it will be tedious to press enter again just to format this correctly. And so what we can do is we can add another function here. Now for the purpose of discussion, I will show you the differences. So first, in this cell, let's press wrap text and then let's try to input, let's say this is ASDF, this is GHJK, and then let's try to concatenate the two. So concatenate this one and this one, press enter, it's just going to combine the two. However, if you want line breaks, let's just first start with the space. You can use ampersand and then quotation marks. You can add a space and then quotation mark and then ampersand. This now has a space. However, what if you want to add a line break? Let's say you want GHJK on another line. So what you can do is, between the ampersands, you need to type in char, open parenthesis, and then 10, and then close parenthesis. So press enter. If you will drag this down and then wrap text, it will now add GHJK on another line. And so this is what we want. And so here, let's add and char 10 for each choice. So char 10 ampersand. Let's do this for all. Right here, just replace the commas. This one, and also this one. Now, if you will not wrap the text, it will not change the format here in Excel. However, if you will copy this and then go to Word, it will now automatically format the item. And so this is the most efficient workaround. And so if you will drag this down up to number 5, you will now have this. So just copy it and then paste to Word. Let's remove this. Press Ctrl V. It now has its own format. Oh, by the way, I messed up right here because the choices did not correspond with the question. And so for the workaround, we need to use the indirect function. Now to do that, let's take a screenshot of this sheet. And so we will include the columns. Let's copy it here. Now as you can see right here, this question, the ratio of the lateral strain to longitudinal strain should have the following choices: Poisson's ratio, deformation ratio, and so on. But here, it's already different. And so what you can do is, you can use the indirect function. So let's just remove this. Let's use indirect. And then we'll try to reference the cell based on the random number. So this is the random number. So A, and then indirect. Now the indirect function will specify the corresponding letter of the cell and its number. So for choice A, we need this one for the randomized choices. So by the way, we are referring to this sheet, and then it will always start with the sheet and then press ampersand. And then notice that for the randomized choices, we have for letter A, it's located along column H, for B, column I, for C, column J, and then for D, column K. So here, we'll input column H. Now this is the corresponding letter of the cell that we are referencing. And so press ampersand. And then here, since we want to reference the choices, we need to add 2 to the corresponding random number because the location of the choices has an offset of 2. As you can see, the choices started at row number 3, not row number 1. And so we're gonna reference the random number plus the offset, which is 2. And so press enter. Let me check. Let's remove this first. Let's see if it works. So again, indirect, and then question bank, which is the name of the sheet that we are referencing. So question bank, exclamation point, and then quotation mark, and then ampersand, the column, and then our row, which is the random number plus 2, and this one plus 2. Press enter. Let's just make this one word. Perhaps it doesn't identify the space. So it now works. It didn't work earlier because we had a space in our sheet. So again, this is for letter A. Add an ampersand. This is now aligned with the choices. If we'll drag it, this is an absolute reference. Let's press F4. Let's drag it. Let's make this B, this one C, and this one D. Press enter. Now letter A corresponds to H, while letter B corresponds to I, and so on. And so we'll change this into I, this one into J for letter C, and then for letter D we have K. By the way, this is also D. And so let's drag it down again. These are now our answers. And so here, since the answer key is in G, we'll change this into G. But we'll still use the indirect function. And so let's copy this. This is for the numbering. and then let's just copy this. Let's make this a number, the item number, ampersand, period, and then space. And then for the indirect, our letter, instead of K, we'll use G. And so this is G. Press enter. And so now, since when we are dragging this down, we want to change the random number for the cell reference, we need to use the mixed referencing because the column will not change, but we want the rows to change when we will drag it down. And so that's why the choices right here is still modulus of ductility for the first column. And so to do that, just remove the $sign right before the number. And so let's drag this down, and then let's also change this. Let's remove the $sign. Let's drag it, and also here, let's make this B, C, and this one D. And then let's drag it down. We now have this. And then again, let's make this I, this one J, and this one K. And then we can now drag this down. So highlight, and then we'll drag it down. These are now our choices. And so in our test format, we already have our questions, and then you can also include your answer key. Just reference this column. And so once you have this, you can just copy this one, and then go to Word, press Ctrl V. This is now your questionnaire. And so this is the most efficient way to randomize questions and choices just by using Excel. And so I hope this video helped you. Now in the future, we can discuss how to improve the format by using some functions in Microsoft Word. And so thank you so much for listening.